Shalom everyone, Brandon from Least to Greatest Torah on YouTube, and it's been a little bit since my last video, but life's happening, and honestly a YouTube video isn't really in the front of my head, perhaps not as often as it ought to be, but in the New Testament, several of the Gospels, our Messiah, Yeshua, is approached by one who is very well educated on the Torah. And honestly, I'm coming off the top of my head here. It's just a thought as I'm heading on home. But this gentleman asks him what the greatest command is. And as we all know, Yeshua replied, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4 through 9. Now, he didn't say the chapter and verse or whatever, but he said, Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our God, Yahweh is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, everything you got. And the second one is like it. And then he quotes Leviticus chapter 19. Verse 18, if I remember correctly. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And I just wanted to record a quick video. Just wanted to ask, are you loving your Creator with everything you have? Are you doing the best that you can right now? Or are there some things that you need to work on that pop into your head? And for me right now, I can tell you, is the way I go about presenting Scripture, whether it's to a believer or a non-believer. I definitely need to work on that. And remember that, especially with other believers, we're not told to have any sort of animosity towards anybody. As a matter of fact, the second commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. Neighbor doesn't necessarily mean believer. I believe it's Colossians chapter 3 that says Christ is in all, which includes your enemies, which includes our enemies as believers. And so my question is if you're supposed to love God with everything you have, with a willing heart, not because you're told to or because you're going to go to hell if you don't, not anything like that, because you have a willing heart. We got to remember that, whenever the Israelites were wandering the wilderness, the only ones who were commanded to help build the tabernacle or provide materials for the tabernacle or supervise the building of the tabernacle or what have you, were only those who had a willing heart. If you didn't have a willing heart, you couldn't give 100%. So check this out. You're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself, and you're supposed to give God 100% of everything you've got. If you're not 100% with yourself, you can't give anybody, Yah or your neighbor, 100%. And I'm reminded of this because, like I said, one of the things that I'm working on, that I know I need to work on, is the way I bring about Scripture. And whether or not, is it because I want to just prove myself right, or is it because I'm trying to, maybe water a seed or plant a seed, or however you want to put it? Are my thoughts human thoughts, or are my thoughts in line with Yah? And I understand that there's times for righteous anger and rebuking your neighbor frankly and all of this, that, and the other, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about any run-of-the-mills conversation that may or may not go into Scripture. How do you bring that Scripture up? Do you bring it with animosity, or are you trying to, like I said earlier, prove yourself right? Or are you being a modern day Bible thumper? Because that's not what we're called to be. We're called to do the best we can with what we've got to please the Father. And so, how do you love the Father? And how do you love your neighbor as yourself? Well, it's all listed in the one in the 10 commandments, and then every other commandment underneath that, kind of like if you were to look at it as like a family tree. And I know it's not the right kind of, doesn't really match the metaphor or whatever, but if you have love the Lord your God with all your heart, how do you do that? Well, here's all these other commands that show you how to do that. And the same goes for loving your neighbor as yourself. How do you love your neighbor as yourself? How do you do that? And underneath those two commandments hang all the law and all the prophets. But you can't do any of that if you yourself are not right with yourself, because you can't love your neighbor as yourself if you treat yourself like a piece of crap who's not worth anything. And if you treat yourself like a piece of crap that's not worth anything, you're definitely not going to have a joyful attitude when you go to do the things that God commanded you to do, because you're just going to be so solemn and depressed and worried and filled with anxiety that you can't really focus 100% on what it is you're trying to do, and more importantly, why you're trying to do it. Are you trying to benefit the kingdom, or are you just worried someone's going to wonder why you wore this shirt with those pants? No one cares. So the question is just, look inside, see if there's anything you need to work on, and get after it. If you guys want to make a comment or something like that, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out, or anything you need to do to, if I can help you out in any way, shape, or form, I'm always here to do it. If you want to talk scripture, but I don't want to sit there and beat on a dead horse or argue about it. I'm not trying to bring about contempt for any particular denomination or church. That's not my goal. And I know, there might be a couple of videos back where maybe that's the attitude I gave off, and honestly, I apologize for that, because that's not exactly what I want to do, although it is what I'm doing. So just got to fess up, take responsibility for your own actions, and try to do your best to do right by the Most High. And if all you do is pick up the book and read a chapter a day, good on you, man. I'm glad you're reading. All the brothers and sisters here on this planet are created by the same person. We need to act like it. We can't be trying to drag our soapbox everywhere we go just so we can prove ourselves right, or blah, 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 blah. Of course, 2 + 2 = 4. You can't argue against that. Yada, yada, yada. Okay, that's fine. But to bring any kind of ill will or animosity into that conversation ain't worth it. But anyway, just a quick little video for you. We're already almost 10 minutes in. Just wanted to toss out that question. Are you loving God with everything you got right now? Are you loving your neighbor as yourself right now? And if you are loving your neighbor as yourself, how much do you love yourself? Count your blessings, brothers and sisters. Shalom.